Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of FGC Behind the Smoke. Today we have a special guest on. We're sitting down with Alex from Adaptable Strength. Alex, thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to meet with us. I know there's a bit of a time zone difference, right? So you're on
hmm
Eastern time, right?
Yep, that I am.
So it's what, around 4 p.m. over there?
Yep, that's it.
Yeah. So
So,
whereabouts are you located?
so I'm currently in Westchester in Pennsylvania. It'll be easier to say that I'm just shy of an hour west of Philly. It's usually how people
Okay.
will be able to kind of pinpoint me on a map.
Cool, cool, nice. And you grew up there?
No, I actually grew up in New York, in
Oh,
Yonkers.
okay.
Yeah, Yonkers, just outside of New York City. I could walk to the subway and go into New York City.
Okay, cool,
Mhm.
cool. What was it like growing up in New York?
Uh, it was interesting because I mean, right now, what I find myself telling a lot of people just with everything going on in the world is that I'm from New York, where everybody's everything and no one cares. So it's
Hmm.
just basically since you have access to everything and everyone that you can do what you want. I spent most of my time playing video games and getting into powerlifting to a higher level than anyone should at 16, 17 years old. So I didn't have like that standard high school experience that people will like talk about going around and partying and all that stuff. I hung around with sweaty old men in the gym, and then my friends and I would just stay up late playing video games. Like that was my upbringing pretty much.
Awesome, awesome. How'd you get into powerlifting at such a reasonably young age, I would say. Most powerlifters you're typically, after high school, like in their, mid 20s or whatever, right? But you got into it at 16, you said.
Yeah, so I started going to the gym when I was 10. I was basically annoyed at being picked later in gym than I thought I should be. I was annoyed about how when I'd be trying to do things, I would get it right like 1 out of 10 times. Like I remember in wiffle ball in third grade, like I was one of two people to actually hit a home run like over the fence in like the courtyard that we played in and everything. And yet I'm being picked close to last. And I was like, this is stupid. And I felt small, fat, and weak at 10 years old. So you can look into all the psychological implications there, and you are correct. Um, but then my mom was like, "You're dumb, so here's a trainer." And I just never really stopped. And then in the gym, at this point, like I've been lifting 6 years. So I'm 16 and I'm trying to experiment with like sumo deadlifting. And I have this crappy weightlifting belt on. And this guy who at the time was 260, 5'10 with a six pack and squatting 660, 670 in competitions.
Wow.
Yeah, like he saw me doing that and it was like, your belt is a band-aid. And I was just like, wait, what? He's like, yeah, your belt sucks. I was like, oh, what kind of belt should I get? He told me. I ended up getting it. I ran into the gym, sorry, I ran into him at the gym a week or two later, walked out to him with the belt that I got and said, hey, is this the kind of belt that you were talking about? And he was really taken aback. He was like, yeah, you want to train with me? And I was like, yeah.
Nice.
And then the rest is history. But like, I always knew to listen to people who were better than me.
For sure. Well, yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, that's really how you grow and learn, right? Is
Mm.
seeing people who are doing it the right way and learning from them, right? He was probably pretty impressed that this, 16-year-old kid is coming up to him and being like, "Hey, this is the one that you told me to get."
Yeah.
And I'm sure there was a lot of admiration that you probably had for him for giving you that advice and for
Oh yeah.
him offering to kind of maybe take you under his wing a bit, right?
Oh yeah. Yeah. No, it's a lesson that I've taken throughout my entire life. Like he's still one of my very good friends and everything. So like, I'll still like even though like he's still in New York and I'm over here in PA, like whenever I go up to New York, I usually pop down to his basement and train with him because he has a whole gym in his basement. So just hang out and work out
Nice.
still to this day. Yeah.
Nice. So have you always kind of focused on powerlifting then?
So interestingly, no. The funny thing is that I was first off, remember, I'm insane. So when I met him and everything, I actually had my eyes on competing in bodybuilding. So
Okay.
I actually was like I was leaning out and everything and actually shooting for a couple shows in a couple months. I had no idea what that actually would entail, but I decided I wanted, I was going for it. But then he kind of, through bringing me into his group, I just switched gears and went into powerlifting and did pretty well. I mean, they set world records and did all that stuff, but doesn't mean anything because no one powerlifted back then. Nowadays, if
Hmm.
you look at the records for like the 17-year-olds that are lifting, like they're hundreds of pounds more than what I was doing. But I had no
Wow.
competition, but I can still say that, yeah, I set world records, even though they're meaningless.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's still something to be proud of, I would say, because I mean, I don't know too many 17-year-olds out there that are setting world records, right? So,
Mhm.
very impressive, obviously. How did you find your training kind of changed when you decided, okay, I'm going away from that bodybuilding and I'm focusing more on powerlifting? How did your body adapt to that, and what changed as far as your lifts and stuff? I know there's going to be some obvious stuff, but I'm sure there's some stuff in there that some of us might not know, right?
So that's an interesting question for my particular situation because unbeknownst to any of us at that time, there's some genetic joint thing going on with me. So I was going from a bodybuilding style training, still squatting, deadlifting, and all that stuff. Didn't really bench. I've never liked bench, but I, through powerlifting and my ability to just turn off pain receptors and train really hard. Like this is for no one who's seen me train, like you don't quite get that, but if you want, like on my Instagram thing, I have like a little highlight that is called lifting faces and it's me just utterly dying in the gym because of the intensity that I can go for. And so when I made the switch from training from bodybuilding to powerlifting, and now we're talking about maxing out, going truly all out, and every single week we would be pushing it, even if we're doing five, sixes and not necessarily singles. I would leave every Sunday workout and I'd have burst blood vessels from my sternum all the way up across
Oh,
my shoulders and my head and everything because that's how hard I went. And so doing
wow.
that on top of an unknown genetic joint thing going on, by the time I was 20, I had surgery on both my shoulders and hips.
Holy shit, really?
Yeah. Yeah. Because I was also
Damn.
doing it with femurs that were the wrong shape for my hip joints. So in the hip surgeries, they had to repair my labrums and also shave down the heads of my femurs so I could actually have my legs fit into the sockets the way they're supposed to.
Holy shit,
So
dude.
yeah, so I did all my records and everything with femurs that were the wrong shape for my body.
Damn. Oh,
Yeah.
I'm sure if you had the right shape femur, you would have you probably could have done a lot bigger records, eh?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Like
Yeah.
it's actually kind of funny. There are a few moments in your life where you can look back on and say, okay, like that was the moment where my trajectory changed. And you also then can do the opposite thing of like, well, if this had not happened, my trajectory would have stayed the same. And then where would I have been? So I do that sometimes thinking about all this stuff. And if I just didn't have that genetic joint thing going on and all that damage happening, I'd probably still be powerlifting to this day and probably be at not necessarily the top level, but pretty high up there. I
Hmm.
mean, like I put on strength fast. My first meet that I did, I totaled 970, and with a
Wow.
really with the shoulder that needed surgery. So I benched like 230 in that, and then 3 months later competed again, and my total went up to 1,115, and my bench only went up like 5 pounds. So
Okay.
all of that difference in my total was all completely in squat and deadlift. And so
Right.
if I'd been able to like continue that trajectory and everything and fix my shoulders, all this other stuff, yeah, I'd still be powerlifting and I'd probably have a lot more of a following. I'd probably have sponsors and everything because I was doing a lot of stuff with Universal Nutrition's like Animal Forum and everything. So my trajectory probably would have been being assigned animal athlete powerlifter.
Interesting. Interesting. So was it that situation then that made you change then from the powerlifting to doing the more adaptable strength training stuff?
Yes, that's exactly what it was because I basically had all of these surgeries and everything, and trying to then fix my body afterwards was Uh, I don't know if are you guys care about cursing on this?
No, no, you can say whatever you want, dude.
Okay, cool. It was a complete clusterfuck. Complete and utter
Yeah.
clusterfuck. I mean, my shoulder surgeon, first off, he was friends with one of my training partners. And so I remembered to this day, like with after the first surgery, and everything, the first time that I see him and everything, he's like, yeah, since I know how you train, I tightened you up extra. So that's the intensity I was going for. But that also means the recovery is going to be interesting when your surgeon tightens you up more so than they normally would. And so
Yeah.
they talk about, yeah, you're going to have a 6 to 9 month recovery. No, for me, with everything that I had going on and all of the interactions between the injuries that I had and tendonitis issues and all these other stuff going on, I probably spent 6 to 8 years afterwards, like where most of my workouts would be an hour and a half to 2 hours long, with a half hour of it being rehab that I designed for myself. Yeah. And I remember being in
Wow.
college and having to do something like my rehab over there. And this was upstate New York next to Canada. Like they're not going to have physical therapists that are at the peak, like the hospital for special surgery, where I had all my surgeries.
Right.
So I ran my own physical therapy out of their office using their physical therapists.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow.
So
Right
so
on.
I do a lot of learning. So like when I talk to people about how like, yeah, this is what I mean by adaptable. I had to run my own recovery for years because I'm trying to get myself to be as functional as I used to be or better. And I would say now I'm actually significantly more functional and better than I was before the surgeries.
Interesting. Yeah. You know what? I think like, because like some of the videos that I've seen on your Instagram of some of the way that you're doing your lifts and stuff, it just makes so much more sense, right? You're I don't want to say you're lifting in awkward positions, but you're lifting in positions that you are going to be placed in day to day, right?
Mhm.
And you're building strength that way as opposed to just like linear, right? Like your typical straight on deadlift or whatever, right? I've seen you do things in different ways, right?
Mhm.
Um, let's chat about your relation to the first responder world, and because I know you were a dispatcher, you come from a military family and stuff like that. Can you tell me about that, like how you got into that and what
Yeah,
that was like?
sure. So the military family, I guess, would be the beginning of it. So what's kind of cool is that my uncle on one side, he was he retired as a captain in the Navy as a psychologist and like worked with SEALs, did all sorts of stuff around like Afghanistan, 9/11, all those other things. Like he was at like the top security clearances and everything. So who knows what exactly he was doing there because he can't tell me.
Yeah,
As much as I would love to hear some of those stories, like I know that like when things were really bad, he was in on those conversations around
yeah.
9/11. So I grew up hearing some funny stories and everything with him hanging around in his house where there was all sorts of like old war memorabilia, cool history just everywhere. So I had that. And then on my other side, on my mom's side, my uncle there, he was an Army Ranger. He went to West Point. And then my grandfather, like my mom's father, was a Japanese American in World War II in the Army.
Oh, wow.
So anyone who understands what that really means, like you're going, okay, then.
Yeah, for
So
sure.
so I have that upbringing and like I remember being a kid and like one of my favorite things to do when I was at my like mom's parents' house and everything, like her brother would come by and all that stuff and I would love to have sword time where I would just play with his West Point sword. So that was my childhood.
Right on.
Yeah, and so then I graduate college. I have a bio degree now with no certifications, no research experience, nothing medical attached to it, and poor grades. What am I gonna do for a job with that? And my mom
Right,
was just like,
right.
hey, mom was just like, hey, like you're good under pressure. I just read this article about 911. I was like, sure, I'll give that a go. And that's how I got into it. And just kind of fit.
Yeah, nice. So were you working on the like working in the dispatch center? Was it all emergencies or was it fire specifically or police or ambulance? What was it?
So I've done it in two different places. The first was Little Rock, Arkansas, which is if everyone thinks like nothing happens in Arkansas. Well, you know what? Gangs and murders happen all the time in Little Rock,
Yeah.
Arkansas. So
Yeah.
there it was police and fire only, and then an ambulance company would be who would handle the medical side of things. And then I came up here to Chester County in Pennsylvania, and first off, crazy switch going from gang murder central to I don't know if it's still the case, but it was like seventh richest county in the country. So
Right.
the whiplash of going from one place like that to the other was insane. So I've got a lot of feelings on that one. But then here, like it was handle everything. And
Right.
since it's like a municipality state, there's like in Chester County, there were 73 different police areas, and you have tons of different firefighter areas and everything because it's all volunteer and there aren't really very many. I think there are some, but not many career firefighters here. A lot of it's volunteer. So that adds a whole nother thing going on. But it gets more complicated because some of the places have their own police departments and their own dispatchers. Some of it's state police. I went from this is one city where you handle fire and police to 73 different police areas. State police are involved. Some places have their own thing. Some places have their own dispatchers, and everything is regimented. And some places do it this way and that way. And it's interesting. So I've seen both sides of the spectrum when it comes to organized and just war zone.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I'd imagine, like you said, like going from like a smaller area where, yeah, you're dealing with a lot of violent crime and stuff like that, but then to go to such a larger area to cover, and almost it sounds like there's more almost more bureaucracy in a sense because you're dealing with like state level, municipal level, all
Yeah.
that kind of stuff, right? So
Oh yeah. Yeah.
did
I was, I'll tell you like right now, like one of my gripes about it was that here in Chester County, they use the phrase customer service when it comes to 911. That has
mm,
always bothered me and forever will bother me. And I don't care who asks me about that. I will tell them that bothers me.
yeah,
I went from actually being the nice guy in Little Rock Murder Central to getting in trouble all the time because of my tone of voice. And
really
yeah,
interesting.
yeah. And I was just like, guys, this is not customer service. I'm not trying to sell them a mattress.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm being efficient. And if
Yeah,
my
for
being
sure.
efficient is pissing you off, I don't know if that's a good thing or not,
Right. Yeah.
but whatever.
So then you went from there, and then you started doing like your own training programs, all that kind of stuff, and you started working towards training first responders. Is that
Mhm.
correct?
Yes. So I left 911 a couple years ago, for many reasons, but one of the continuous things like throughout the entirety, even when I was back in Little Rock and I was making my career, all the other stuff, one of the things that always bugged me was the amount of preventable issues. Like
Hmm.
that always got me because especially it got really hammered in when I started having to handle the medical side of things here in Pennsylvania. And we would at that time have to always ask about medical history for anyone who we had to send someone for. And the amount of hypertension, diabetes, and cardiac issues in various shapes or forms, and then also looking at all of the coworkers and everything and watching their health just deteriorate, people just blowing up, the amount of people that I would talk to that would look at me and say like, "Oh, you have muscles." Like, "Oh yeah, like yeah, I got work out and all that stuff." They're like, "Oh yeah, I used to." That
Right.
phrase, "I used to," like, and it just bugged me. And then I even had an old coworker, like the most knowledgeable fire guy in Little Rock back when I worked there, ended up dying because he was overweight, unhealthy, didn't do much, blood clots in his legs and everything. And I don't know if this was the tipping point or just a contributing factor, but they ended up getting so short-staffed that they had to have people do forced overtime, and he medically should not have been allowed to do that. So you have
Right.
these situations going on, and I know that if there's anything that I know, it's going to be physical improvement. I did it
Hmm.
for myself for years and years and years. I helped a ton of people completely unofficially and everything. So I had the background, the experience. And now I've seen a population that's supposed to be taking care of everybody else and they never take care of themselves. So
Yeah.
I feel like I'm
Yeah.
just like, let's work on the preventative side for the people who are going to be handling the worst things that anybody can handle. So yeah, it's a good fit. I have experience in all the areas. Let's go for it.
Right. Right. Yeah. So is it when you do adaptable strength training for first responders, is it tailored per the individual person, or do you also have like some overall workout plans that you would recommend?
Both. But if um if someone is coming to me for one-on-one coaching, it is 100% individual. And I know a
Right.
lot of coaches will claim that, but a lot of them are just doing, oh, I have three different programs. This is the one that best fits you. We're going to stick you on that one. That's not how I function. And I will tell you this in 4,000 different ways. One of the simplest is I refuse to get an app for my clients because apps limit you because whatever the app is capable of doing, that's it. I
Hmm.
function completely through spreadsheets and I have like a dozen different spreadsheets for all sorts of different aspects of what we are needing to track to get them where they need to be. And when it comes to training and figuring out the training plan, I will always only make one after me and that person have had a real talk. And it's usually gonna be like a half hour of me going back and forth about what have you done, what are you doing, what would you like to do, and then figuring out based upon, okay, how many days a week can you actually get to the gym? Not how many days would you like to, actual. Because one of the biggest downfalls that I'll have with people is they'll be like, oh, I can get to the gym 5 days a week. Yeah, definitely. Like that's what you're supposed to do. I'll get there 5 days. And I'm like, all right, how many days are you actually going to show up for those? Well, I mean, I know I'll at least be able to get like three, probably four. I should be able to get 5 in the week. So I'll get this plan for five. Like, no, we're going to plan for three. If you can do more,
Hmm.
that's a bonus. But we're going to plan for three. We're going to take what you want to achieve. These are going to be how we want to do it. But if you can only work out on a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, that's going to be different than the program I would make for you if you can train Monday, Wednesday, Friday. So you have to look at also the frequency of how, not just like how often in the week, but frequency in
Hmm.
terms of how many rest days in between. All that's going to
Right.
become a part of the full picture where the individualization is actually going to be taking place. I can't put someone on a full body program where you do everything with five different exercises each day if they're going to be doing it on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. You're going to be
Right.
more likely actually to have better benefit by having them do an upper body day, a lower body, upper, lower, upper, lower, and actually putting them on essentially a 2 day split, even though they do it 3 times in the week. So there can be some break. It also depends on their experience. And I'll give you two crazy examples that I have from people I've worked with. One guy is in the Navy, works on submarines, which means not only do I not hear from him at all for like 4 months if he's going to be literally underwater and without
Yeah.
internet, he also has to then do that time period on a submarine where he's training on a submarine in the space of a submarine. So I had to give him a program not only capable of handling the tiny space and the very limited equipment, but also a way for him to be able to track it on his own for that entire time period. So I had to customize spreadsheets for him, not just with the expectation that I'll be updating it in 4 weeks or 8 weeks later to get into the next phase. I had to map it out so he could have all of the pieces that he needed so he could stretch it out for 4 months potentially.
Right.
That is a situation that most coaches would be like, I'm not even going to work with you. That is outside of my scope. But for me, like that is my scope. And then
Right.
there's other simpler examples. Like one guy's a police officer who, with his schedule, he can only train 2 days a week. But he came to me wanting to train like a bodybuilder, a powerlifter, and a strongman. So for him, we had to get really creative in terms of that. Like he could regularly do 2 days a week. All right, cool. We're going to give you a 14-day split. So you have a day one, a day two, a day eight, and a day nine. And those are what you're working out because you only do those 2 days in a row there. So it's worst case scenario pretty much in every single way. I can't
Right.
space out his workouts so it's one on Monday, one on Friday. It's just like one on Monday, one on Tuesday, and the next Monday, the next Tuesday. So I had to give him a hybrid 14-day thing where you hit all the aspects that he needed to hit to be happy and get progress. And he's doing it phenomenally and loves it. And again, it's a situation most coaches would be like, no, not handling.
Right.
So when I say I individualize, I individualize to an extreme.
Can you still make significant progress only working out twice a week?
Oh yeah. Oh
Yeah.
yeah. The limiting factor is never the frequency. The limiting factor is going to be a combination of the intensity that you train, the intelligence behind the design of the program, feedback from the person doing it to the coach to help fine tune it, and then what are they doing in terms of nutrition and sleep.
Right.
all
Yeah,
of those
recovery.
things all of those things are going to be a huge factor into all of it. So you could give me a person and have them only able to work out twice a week, and if they nail everything else, they will actually get much farther than someone else who tries to work out 5 times a week but doesn't pay attention to sleep, doesn't pay attention to nutrition, sometimes gets in 3, 4, 5 days a week, and it varies, but they're still getting 2 to 3 times the amount of workouts as my twice a week guy. Twice a week
Hmm.
guy will blow them out of the water.
Interesting. Yeah. I've noticed with me personally, like I used to try and hit the weights like, 5 days a week kind of thing. Now I've gone down to 3 days a week, full body.
Mhm.
Um, and I do a mix of like strength with like hypertrophy workouts as well, right?
Mhm.
And then for my cardio on my off days, I train jujitsu. But I found I've since doing the going from 5 days a week to 3 days a week, I've noticed um, better results. But I've also been a lot more strict with my recovery, especially when it comes to my nutrition and stuff like that too, right? So I'm glad to hear that even if you can only make it 2 days a week, because as you know, first responders working that shift work,
Mhm.
plus having a family and all these different commitments and stuff like that, sometimes getting a lift in kind of takes the back seat, right? So if let's just say a firefighter is listening to this and realistically they can make it to the gym twice a week, what are like some of your biggest pieces of advice for them in order to be able to see the results that they want?
Okay. First off, I love the practical question. These are the kind of questions that I think are fun, honestly, because it forces people to actually realize what's possible. So we'll take this. You have your 2 days a week firefighter guy. You're going to have a couple different goals that are specific to the job. The first one is going to be pretty obvious. You need to be strong. The other thing is the less obvious part of that, which is you need to be strong in weird ways.
Hmm.
So when we think about that, there are a couple concepts behind that that have to be understood. One is that in order to be strong, it comes from essentially the size of the muscle determining its capacity to be strong, and then your skill at using that muscle to actually make that strength possible to happen. And then you multiply that throughout your entire body for using in full body movements where you have to use all those muscles in concert with each other. So we have the goal of strength, but that also means you have to build the muscle to increase its capacity for strength. That is the fundamental truth of functional strength. You are going to be limited by the size of the muscles and your skill at using them. So when you have 2 days a week, we need to go ahead and hit as much as we can for the building size aspect, the building the strength aspect, and then adding on the difficult factor of the weird movements. So what I would do is borrow from very specific sports and the elements that they are fantastic at. One of them, that's the easiest example, this is strongman. If you want to have a solid test of being functional in the most practical of ways at a high level, you look at essentially World's Strongest Man. And if you've only ever seen that on ESPN when it's on once every year or whatever, that's fine. You can already imagine it because you are looking at people taking kegs and throwing them 15 feet in the air. You are talking about people dragging anchors across the field to then toss a bunch of kegs on the other side into a wheelbarrow to then push that wheelbarrow. These are practical things that translate into a firefighter's work amazingly because there are going to be times where firefighters have to move things that don't want to be moved or
Hmm.
people that don't want to be moved. So, in order to do that, you need to make sure that you can function in those different ways. So, in our 2 days that we are planning, we're going to have goals. And it may end up requiring something like what I was telling you about to do with a police officer, where instead of having just a day one and a day two and you just repeat those, you might have three, four, or even five different days and you just rotate through them. And then when you can get to them, you get to them. So we could have a day where it's just simple static strength. So we're going to work you on the big motions. We're going to go through your squats, your deadlifts, and then we might go ahead and put a little bit of some funkiness on it. So one of the things I would then recommend would be throwing in suitcase carries, not a farmer's carry, a suitcase carry. They're essentially the same thing, but a farmer's carry is holding two heavy weights, one in each hand, and they're even, and you then run back and forth with them. Suitcase carry is you only had it in one hand only. So when we're thinking about the weird ways that firemen have to pull different objects, things, people, whatever, you need to be able to have the strength to keep your spine in a safe position and not have it just crumble in one direction. So you have to challenge your core in a way that's way beyond just doing some crunches. You need to think about the functionality of resisting outside movement or outside whatever, forcing your spine to move in a way that you don't want to. So train things on one side only where it tries to pull you off balance and you resist that. So we can throw in your very practical elements of suitcase carries to round out that day with some good solid functional core work, because that's what I would qualify that as. If you want to have grip work, add on to that, do it, but do it in form of a dead hang, something that's different. Don't just go from suitcase carries to farmer's carries and say that you're good. Try to hit them in different ways. So holding your own weight while you're hanging from a bar is going to challenge your grip in a similar way, but you're also going to get more in terms of the mobility aspect of needing to have your shoulders function enough and be healthy enough to support your whole weight and not have you just dislocate your shoulder. So there's going to be different
Yeah.
aspects in that. And then you can go ahead and get into the second day and be like, all right, cool. We've done more of that, like that solid, stable base and everything. Let's get into some other aspects. Let's start working on shoulder strength, twisting, things like that. And so you can then do that kind of work after you do some standard hypertrophy work, because again, we're trying to balance out the building of the muscle and then getting the skill to use that muscle to improve your overall strength. Now, having said all that, that's a very broad outline. And when it gets to the specifics of the person that I'd be working with, that's when we'll get into many more nitty-gritty details into it. And depending on where they are, what their weaknesses are, and what's strong, we may get differences in terms of what we are going to prioritize for them. There are going to be some people where we're like, we got to hammer that core stability because you're just folding. And so we might throw
Hmm.
in additions, like maybe instead of doing all standard squats, we're going to do half standard squats, but also half Zerker squats. So we can go ahead and challenge their ability to resist that spine from just folding over forwards because you have to support that bar inside the crook of your elbows in front of you. I can go on for this for a really long time, so I should probably just stop right there.
No, no, you're good, man. This is super useful information for the people who are going to be listening to this, man.
Mhm,
Like a lot of our listeners are firefighters or aspiring firefighters, right? So,
mhm.
especially with the aspiring firefighters, like a lot of this stuff is going to really be able to help them, before they even get on the job, so that way they're ready for the job, right? And for the firefighters listening to it, there's a lot of guys out there that are looking for ways to adapt their strength so it's more functional for the job. So really, I mean, this is really great content that a lot of people are going to really want to hear. So
Okay,
yeah, man, by
so
all means, keep going.
okay, so then what I'm going to do is just point out a few specific exercises, and I would say that these are ones that I would strongly recommend unless you have like a medical reason that not to do it, blah, 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 all that stuff. So disclaimer side, not a doctor. Cool, we're done with that. Now, let's get to the fun part. So some of them I've already mentioned, but I'm gonna go a little more into detail. The suitcase carry, I think, is going to be really, really important. We want to make sure that spine is supported and you actually work the muscles that are involved with that. But I'm going to give you an add-on to that, and that is how you breathe. One of the biggest pet peeves of mine when it comes to training and being functional is that a lot of what's going to determine whether your spine actually folds under pressure or not has almost nothing to do with the muscles directly around it and has more to do with how you breathe. And I'm not talking about some like yoga thing where like wee woo, because first off, yoga's actually breathing is a lot more intense than that. So if someone knows how to breathe for yoga, they have a big advantage in terms of learning how to breathe for lifting. Here's how
Really
you breathe.
interesting.
Yeah. So here's how you breathe for lifting. What you are trying to do in order to support your spinal position and keeping everything secure in there is you take in as much of a breath as you possibly can. You become as big as you can, and then you condense and become as small as you can while keeping your spine in a neutral position. You're not going to overly crunch down and bend forward so that you could become small as if you're in the bottom of a crunch. That's going to be completely counterproductive. You're also not going to do the reverse thing where you're like, okay, well, I'm going to have something on my back. So you then throw your chest super far up, throw your butt really far back, and you make yourself small, but you elongate your abs essentially. You go in
Hmm.
the middle, so your spine is actually going to be where it looks like in an anatomy book, where everything is stacked on top of each other. Each disc is in the proper position for them to support the disc above and below them. So that's the position you want to be in. Take as big a breath as you can, and then you condense down. And what you do is you actually will flex not just your abs, but your internal abs, your sides, and your lower back. Your lower back counts as your core. So when people say brace your core, this is what they actually mean. But 99% of the time, if you ask someone how to brace their core, they're just like, oh, you just brace your core. And they just repeat it back to you. Like, okay, but how? And then usually you just get crickets. The way you do it, big breath in, compress, increase intra-abdominal pressure by essentially turning yourself into that oxygen tank that's on your back. If you think about the oxygen tank, it is a rigid metal what cylinder.
Hmm.
And you can pump in more air into it, and that PSI just increases, but the size stays the same. You are flesh and bone. So if you're going to become that oxygen tank, you have to do that through a lot of intention and flex everything that is not your rib cage to basically extend that rib cage down to form your oxygen tank. Take that big breath in, compress yourself down, flex your front, sides, low back, and internals. You do that, and you're going to be much more stable when you have weight on your back. So let's take a very practical example of this that's not even the gym. The fireman's carry. The fireman's carry. You have someone on your back, and if you're having to move them quickly, if you just let your abs relax and just breathe in and out normally, you're both folding. But
Hmm.
what you are unconsciously having to do, if you're not doing it consciously, is you're actually flexing everything around to prevent your spine from bending in whatever way the forces are trying to make it happen. So you already have some of the basis there if you can successfully fireman carry someone who is heavier because you're doing that. But then you have to learn how to do that intentionally so that in the gym, if you are squatting, if you are deadlifting, doing something where you have that need to resist your spine bending, you have to know how to breathe.
Hmm.
Takes practice and takes direction.
I've actually heard people say before, like, when you're lifting heavy, like work on your breath work and stuff, but I never really understood it. So thanks for explaining that, because it now that you've explained it, it makes way more sense. Because I just thought you just, kind of flex your core and, you know breathe in and then, breathe out as you're pushing, kind of thing. But there's definitely like a lot more behind it than that, right? So,
Yeah. And how long have you been lifting?
oh, buddy, 17 years, like since
Hmm.
probably since I was 14 or 15,
Yeah.
right?
And now this is the first time you've actually had someone explain it to you, and yet you've heard
Yeah,
all the time about people telling you to do it.
yeah, exactly.
That is actually, in my opinion, dangerous.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I mean, yeah, especially like I can think of multiple times when I've gotten myself injured, where I've injured my back, whether deadlifting or squatting, where I have weight on that I know I can push, but just something gives, and a lot of times, from just thinking back to it, like a lot of the times it's going to be my stability, right? That's going.
Hmm.
I get lazy with my stability, or I don't brace properly or whatever, right? So
Hmm. So
do you
that
find that? Oh, sorry. Go
so
ahead.
I can take it later. What's your question?
No, I was just gonna say, like, do you find that that's pretty common when it comes to injuries from lifting? Is it's just like a stability thing, or is it people just being overconfident in what their capabilities are?
The short answer is yes.
Yeah, both, right?
So yeah, they both are incredible either risk factors or benefits for a person. So I'll get into the first part, which is what I was going to say before you ask the question, but it still is actually is incredibly relevant because you hit on a really key word in there with it being the stability factor. Because what I just told you about the bracing is an incomplete thing about the breathing. The secondary part of it that completes the picture is that the breathing is really about whether your priority is stability or power output when you are doing that movement. Because you've already touched on yourself. You're like, yeah, well, when you lower the weight, you hold your breath, and when you raise the weight back up, you breathe out. Because
Hmm.
you're correct. When you breathe out, you're able to produce more power, more force is being able to happen. However, you have a secondary question under there, okay, about what is the point where you start to breathe out? And that is actually determined by whether or not the priority at that point in the lift is stability or power. You hold your breath, you hold your brace, you have more stability but less power. You let your breath out, now you have more power but less stability. So you have to know exactly when in that lift that priority will actually shift. So we'll take a squat, for example. If you are squatting, and you're doing a 1 rep max where stability is going to be absolutely paramount. Because at the moment you lose stability, if you're in the wrong spot, you will just fold over. You have to take that breath in at the top, and then you force that brace in. And then when you know your position is perfect, at that point, you lower yourself down until you hit depth. And then you bounce up. And the moment that you are going to want to start breathing out is that moment where you are just after that spot where it slows, just a little bit above parallel. So you hold your breath until you get past that point, and then you start to let your breath out a little bit, not a ton, because if you let it all out in one go and you don't finish the rep by the time that breath goes out, you're just collapsing right back down again. So
Right.
you have to have that discussion with yourself about at what point in that lift does that priority switch? And you can pretty much figure that out just by doing a single slow squat because you're going to feel that point where you kind of just unconsciously realize you're able to relax more and the weight just kind of finishes. So when you're
Right.
trying to think about that injury prevention or injury cause, usually it's a combination of exactly what you said. Someone going for the ego and doing more weight than they are capable of, or someone who's competent. If they get hurt, most likely it's a matter of lost focus, or there's something that was an issue beforehand that they ignored and didn't fix and then became the limiting factor. So
Right.
the answer to all of it is yes. And then you can go deeper into looking at the different individual situations and also what the injury was. But the most common thing in a competent lifter is either loss of focus or something pre-existing decided it was time to snap.
Right. Right. For sure. When it comes to mobility, how do you stay on top of your mobility while also um, building strength? Are you stretching a lot? Are you practicing just full range of motion? How can people, like me, for example, like my mobility isn't the best. Like I can't touch my toes, but it's my New Year's resolution is like to focus on my mobility, right? So I'm stretching more and all that. I've definitely noticed improvement. Um, but I found for me personally, like with lifting heavy and all that kind of stuff, um, I mean, this, now that I'm saying it, it sounds stupid because it's an obvious, thing to spend some time to properly recover from your lifts, right? But what does that mean to properly recover from your lifts to keep that mobility or to improve your mobility, but also maintain your strength or get stronger?
Okay. So there are a
If
few
that
things
makes
in there.
sense.
It does make sense, but there's more questions in that than just the one that you asked.
Hmm.
Because first off, You can get mobility without strength training. You can get strong without being mobile. To have them both at the same time is going to be a more nuanced discussion. So there's not one answer to this. Your strategy that I would recommend is going to be, again, individual. But here are some guidelines that I can give you. One is the first priority is making sure that your lifts themselves are going to be true full range of motion, not for the lift itself, but for the targeted muscle. And I'm going to take your example that you just said about you trying to touch your toes.
Hmm.
So, what we can do to help you touch your toes without you doing any stretching in terms of its own thing is we basically incorporate that into your form for a stiff-legged deadlift. And
Mm.
the single most common thing that I'll do with a lifter when I first start working with them and they're trying to show me their stiff-legged deadlift is I will just simply video them and show them that they're not actually keeping their legs stiff. It's called a stiff-legged deadlift for a reason. Also, people call them Romanian deadlifts. There's some discussion about Romanian versus stiff-legged deadlift, but for all intents and purposes for this conversation, I'm going to call them the same thing. They are both a stiff-legged deadlift, and if people want to get into the nuances with me, we can do that later. But I'm going to recognize the nuance, but now ignore it. So I am aware, guys. Don't worry. Um, so that stiff-legged deadlift, our goal is to keep that leg as straight as possible with a slight bend in it. And you then want to lower yourself to the point of the hamstring being as stretched as it possibly can, and then don't go any lower. So many times you'll see people, they'll do that stiff-legged deadlift and they'll say range of motion is important. And therefore, they'll hit that point and then they just let their back around a little bit and go a little bit farther and claim that look how much they are getting in terms of their mobility and flexibility improvement. Not in the hamstring. The goal is the
Right.
hamstring. Secondary goal is glute. Third goal is going to be spinal erectors. But when we're trying to think about you not being able to touch your toes, the main factor in that is going to be hamstrings. If we can
Hmm.
change your stiff-legged deadlift to really incorporate that stretch into it, and then you learn how to use that stretch as essentially a rubber band so that you pull that rubber band as tight as it possibly can, and then you try to make it consciously contract to pull yourself back up, you are going to be taxing that hamstring in the optimal way for you to simultaneously get stronger and more flexible through a range of motion that is specific for the hamstring. Once the hamstring reaches maximum stretch, you go back up. You don't try to milk it further. You don't throw your knees forward so you can get that barbell or dumbbell down lower. You think about it in terms of the full range of motion for the target and nothing more. Anything more is wasted energy or unnecessary risk or both.
Interesting.
So
Very interesting.
we can then also go for another avenue. And we'll say you're doing hamstrings, but you're not doing stiff-legged deadlifts. You're just doing leg curls only. Okay, now we can start getting into another discussion about when is the best time to actually do some static stretching. And I don't recommend static stretching when you're cold, kind of because it's inefficient. And
Mm.
it's not going to be as beneficial as doing it when the muscle is warm. So instead of waking up in the morning and stretching for 5 minutes, if you only have 5 minutes to stretch in the day and that's your 5 minutes, okay. But if you either replace that 5 minutes of in the morning when you wake up with either after you do your leg curls, you then do your stretching for your hamstring, that's going to feel, first off, a hell of a lot different. Your hamstrings will be burning and you're going to be much more keyed into them because they're warmed up. Another thing that I'll recommend is that if you are that morning stretch person, stretch after you have a really warm shower. Warming
Mm.
up is sometimes literally just the temperature. In fact, when you lift and you're doing an exercise and that muscle is working, that muscle does increase in temperature. Warming up is more literal than people think. So stretch when you're warm. Warm shower,
Hmm.
sauna, hot tub, lifting. You have options. And if you want to get more bang for your buck in terms of time you're spending stretching, do it on a warm muscle.
Right. Interesting. Yeah, I had someone explain it once, like if you're stretching while your muscles are cold, it's like trying to pull like a cold elastic band, right? Like it
Yes.
doesn't stretch properly, as opposed to like if it was room temperature or warm, it stretches a lot better. So you're gonna get that that benefit out of it, or I guess you're gonna get more of a benefit out of it by doing it if it's warmed up, right?
Yep. And there's going to also be value in terms of being confident that what you're feeling is correct. When you're cold, I mean, this is a little bit of an extreme comparison, but it's still going to ring true. If you're walking around and it's cold and you start losing your like feeling in your fingers and everything,
Yeah.
you're you're not going to be as aware if they're stretching or doing whatever. And you can say the same thing for muscles too. If your
Hmm.
muscle is cold, you're not going to be quite as in tuned with it as when it's warm. And so to give you another example, just like for me personally, I actually don't like doing stiff-legged deadlifts unless I've done a little bit of a leg curl before it. So like I'll be doing stiff-legged deadlifts with a bunch of weight and everything, and I'm not going to tell you the weight because I actually don't think it matters. But it's a bunch of weight, and I'll only do it after my hamstrings are already warm, so I can have an easier time keying into the hamstrings and making sure my range of motion is only the beneficial range of motion and nothing more and nothing less.
Right.
Mhm.
Now I want to know the weight.
It depends on the modality, but um, there are some videos on my Instagram I think of it, but I generally like to do my stiff leggeds on specific machines. Like if anyone has used like a belt
Hmm.
squat is
Yeah.
probably my most preferred way to do a stiff legged deadlift. Um, on the belt squat, the last time I did it, I want to say I had 450 on it.
Holy shit.
Yeah.
Right on.
Yeah.
I love those machines.
I will also say that don't view that as then thinking that I can do that in a barbell because I can't. So one of the
Hmm.
things that I want people to recognize about like what actually is impressive in the gym or not, you have to look at kind of the physics of it. So a belt squat is generally going to be really advantageous in terms of the physics of it because you're moving the weight. But if you look at the distance you are moving versus the distance the weight is moving, on a belt squat, it goes you, then the weight, and then the machine's lever point. So that means if you're moving 2 feet, the weight plates themselves are probably only moving 1 foot, in which case it's really half of what you're actually lifting.
Okay.
So when you're looking at different machines and different lifts and you're trying to determine what's actually impressive in terms of weight, look at that. And you can compare it to things like a pendulum squat. A pendulum squat is going to have you squatting, but unlike the belt squat where the weight is in front of you and the lever's in front of you, for the pendulum squat, the weight is behind you and the lever's in front of you. So when you are moving, you are actually moving less of a distance than the weight behind you is actually moving. So even if you only have a 25-pound plate on there, it's probably going to be closer to 40 or 50 pounds. So I could say like, yeah, I belt squat 450, but I only pendulum squat 100. Which
Right.
one's actually more impressive? Well, the belt squat's be more like 225. The pendulum squat may be more like 200. All of a sudden, those 400 to 100 difference is in actuality almost exactly the same.
Right. That's why you said the weight's irrelevant. That's interesting.
It's one of those things. And also, too many people are caught up in weights for things and not looking at different mechanics about whether it's actually impressive or not. I mean, the amount of people that you see in the gym and they're squatting like, yeah, I squat 4 plates, but they go down 4 inches. And you see
Yeah.
people like, oh my God, look at that. It's 400 pounds. Oh, I look at that and I just scoff and walk away. But then
Yeah.
I see some high school girl and she's got 60 pounds on the bar, but her squat is going all the way down and her, her hamstrings are like touching the bottom of her calves. That impresses me. So it's all about mechanics, execution, and looking at someone and being able to say that they're training intelligently. That's what
Hmm.
should be impressive. And it is one of the things that really bugs me,
For sure.
especially with Instagram. And you'll see people will do little things like they'll try to make these like badass edits of their squats. Like, yeah, look at me doing 4 plates and everything. But you'll notice in those clips and everything, they'll never have the bottom half of the squat because they never did it. They did the like stuttering horror movie effects and all that while they're going down and up, and then people are like, "That's amazing! It looks so cool." But anyone who actually knows anything knows that, well, they cut out the bottom half of the squat because they didn't do it. It's not
Right, right.
impressive. It's not
Yeah,
impressive.
I stopped caring about the weight a long time ago, and I started caring more about my form and just like engaging the right muscle, because for a long time, especially, you know how it is, like when when you're younger and stuff, and like you're like you care about the weight that you're throwing up, right? So you're tossing on weight, but you're doing the workout half-assed, or shitty form, and there's a lot more potential for injury and stuff. So yeah, a number of years ago, I stopped caring about what weight I'm putting up and what weight other people are putting up. I
Mhm.
just started focus on my trying to have the proper form, and am I feeling the muscle engage in this? Because I mean, better than anybody, but if you're throwing up a shit ton of weight but with shitty form, and like you said, that guy who does a squat, but he only squats 4 inches because he's got 4 plates on. Well, that's not very impressive, as opposed to the high school girl who's squatting 60 pounds but does a full range squat, and with proper mechanics and all that kind of stuff, right? So
Mhm.
um yeah, for everyone listening, like you said, like the weight is irrelevant, right? It's all about the mechanics and
Mhm.
engaging the right muscles and stuff, right?
Yeah.
So um
So actually, I want to take that before you ask your next question because I want to
yeah.
forget this. Um, there is a really important lesson that I can tell you guys from one of the last people that I worked with. He came in already strong and everything. Like he was benching 3 plates and everything, but he was stuck there and everything. So I was trying to teach him what to do, and I cut his weight in half. I cut his weight in half because we needed to actually have him learn how to get a stable base and a reliable setup, one that would actually allow him to be able to use his body efficiently. And so he had to have the very, very unpleasant experience of playing the long game. One of my favorite things to do is play the long game. And he did not like that. But I kept telling him, like, listen, do this now. And in 6 months, you'll be stronger than you were before. But you're going to be weaker in the beginning of it. And he managed, even though it was really mentally hard for him, he managed to actually do that. And he did exactly what I told him to do. Like for the next 4 weeks, you're benching 165 only. I made him go from 315 to 165, but taught him how to actually do it. I'm like, no, you're staying at 165 and you're going to hammer this in so it is second nature and you know exactly what you're feeling and how to control it. And then you can build up. Then it got to be 6 months later, and he's like, dude, 315 feels so comfortable. I'm stable as all hell, and I'm able to actually push in hand. Like, I can't believe that you were right on that. I was like, yeah, you just lived through one of the worst, most unpleasant lessons of any lifter who thinks they are strong when they're not as strong as they could be. But in order to
Mhm.
get there, they have to make changes. And so they have to get worse before they can get better. And the amount of people I have similar stories with in that regard is ridiculous. So, guys, if I rarely do the whole like speak to the audience who's listening thing, but if you can grasp anything, it's don't be afraid to get weaker in the short term. If in a year from now, it will net you more progress. It will benefit you so greatly, and it is hard.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Well, my next question I was going to ask you is like, what's kind of three? What would you say is like your three top pieces of advice for first responders who are um, trying to better their workouts and stuff for job specific things, but obviously when it comes to the strength side of it.
Okay. So, my number one thing has actually very little to do with the gym, and that is don't overpromise yourself. I touched upon it a little bit at the beginning when I'm like, oh, I work with people and like, yeah, I get to the gym 5 times a week. And I'm like, well, can you actually do? And they're like, well, I know some weeks I won't be able to do it. Like, no, do the same thing for yourself and do it for things that are also not the gym. If you can take away some of the willpower cost of whatever it is that you have to do, it will then make it less of a cost to do the things to take care of yourself. Because the way that I like to think about it is you have a finite amount of willpower that you can use throughout the day. And if holding yourself to a really high standard on 5 different things, just trying to think about that saps away some of that willpower, we'll put numbers on it. We'll say you have 100 willpower in the day, but you're thinking about all this stuff and obsessing about it. That in itself takes away 20 or 30 willpower. So all of a sudden you're down now to only being able to use 70 or 80 of your willpower.
Hmm.
But let's compare that to then you saying, all right, I have these 5 things I should do. I can't do all of them. Realistically, I can get 2 of them. So I'm going to only plan to get those 2 things done. All of a sudden, you're now going to allow yourself to have, we'll say you're still going to worry. So instead of going down to 80 or 70 willpower, you'll go down to like 95 or 90. You just gained yourself more ability to push and do things. So think about the gym as something that you, yes, need to do, but you don't have to press yourself to do the optimal 5, 6, 7 days a week type thing. Give yourself a realistic expectation. Find a way to decrease the overall willpower cost of whatever it is that you do in the day. See if you can then allocate that willpower more efficiently to give yourself better quality in what you do and then how you do it. And if you can do that, you're going to have a hell of a lot more success in everything that's not even to do with lifting, which will then free up your brain to when you're actually in the gym. You'll then be able to actually commit and focus to the gym itself because you're not worrying about those 2 or 3 things that were never going to even happen anyway. So
Hmm.
it comes full circle in that regard. So manage your willpower and you will be able to succeed in more things, worry about less, and it will also benefit the gym, health, stress, everything, and basically make you into more of a complete human as opposed to the stress ball that's always being thrown around and handling everything on the go because you're a first responder and that's what you do.
Yeah, absolutely. Mindset, right? Like your mindset plays
Mhm.
a big role in it.
Yes. So there are a couple specific workout things that I would also recommend. And the first one is it's going to sound funny considering everything I said about all of the specific exercises earlier, um, is find what's actually fun for you to do. So again, this kind of goes back into that first one we're talking about willpower. To some extent, it actually does not matter what program you do. There's so many different programs out there that all claim to give you strength, power, and everything. This one's for powerlifting, this one's for CrossFit, this one's for strongman, this one's for bodybuilding. Guess what? Every single one of them will work to some degree as long as you actually stick to it and actually maintain that commitment to it. I can I can give you a program individualized to you, which will be more efficient than one of those things. But even if you're not going to do that, if you just say, I'm going to do this program, actually do it. Don't do it for
Hmm.
2 weeks and then just go off to something else. These things take time. So if you find a program you like, if you find an exercise you like, if you find a core bit that you like, stick with it and use it to build off of and find a way to have the gym be fun, even if it's not the totally optimal thing to do. Because doing something is still going to be a hell of a lot better than doing nothing.
Hmm.
Uh,
Absolutely.
Yeah. Um, I would say there are a few exercises that I think you definitely should do. One of them is going to be the suitcase carries, Zerker squats. I've talked about those. Um, but I think it's more important to think about functions. So the last tip that I'm going to say for these three is to analyze the functions that you know are going to be required of you that are not normally done. And you can take a very simple example of this in terms of like lifting and getting bigger, and that's your side delts. At no point in your everyday life do you just raise your arms out to the side under heavy load. So your side delts, your lateral delts, they don't really get hit much in terms of everyday life. So you have to then, if you're trying to be a bodybuilder and look big and everything, you have to train them specifically and a lot. Otherwise, they won't do anything. You can take that concept and bring it to you as a first responder in terms of what you're going to be doing. What is going to be weird that isn't generally trained that you should do? For firemen, a good example, again, that fireman's carry, having something over your shoulder and walking around with it. So, a great example for taking that concept of walking around with something on your shoulder while you're bent over and trying to keep yourself from falling over or dropping the thing on your shoulder is going to be something like a sandbag carry. So we're trying to get train that function and that ability to work in that position, get a heavy sandbag, toss on your shoulder, and try to walk and run with it, do stuff like that. A sandbag, grab a person, grab a dog. I don't know, but you can be creative about it. And if we can take another example, well, for it's going to be more relevant for probably police officers and everything, but one of the biggest things that's going to be required is grabbing on to someone potentially and not letting go. So you have a lot of function there in terms of just training grip and forearm. So for a police officer, I would say it's very, very important to train your grip and your forearm in as many different ways so that if you do find yourself in a grappling situation, a wrestling situation, that if you hold on to the guy, you're not letting go and you're staying in
Mm.
control. Because if you think you're in control, you're holding on to someone, you think you're in control, but they break that grip, they break your point of control, and all of a sudden you're now on the defensive. And I don't want anyone that's going to be on the hopefully correct side of things being put on the defensive. I want that person to be in control and able to contain a bad situation. So don't lose your grip. Grip, I would also say, is very important for firemen as well. When you think about all the implements that you use and having to stay control of and the rescue situations, I mean, the amount of things you can take with just looking at rescues and the weird things that have to happen, the unique aspect of a lot of those, you can just analyze that and look at functions and say, like, okay, if I were to be put into that situation, have to perform that function, would I be able to do it? And if the answer to that is no, the follow-up then is, okay, how do I train myself to be able to function in that weird position or weird situation? And then you can make up an exercise if you have to go ahead and
Hmm.
fill that in. There is no law that says you have to only do established real exercises. I have made up a bunch, and I can give you a fun one right here. I used to train with samurai swords. So
Nice.
this is my disembodied sword handle that has become like a little tool. If I need a barbell in here, I can just grab it and go in here because I got this to replace if I broke the one that I have over there. But one of the things that's important for using a katana is you have to have the bottom two fingers of specifically your left hand to be really strong because you use those bottom two fingers to snap the sword and stop it where you need to and be able to create the power. So for me to fulfill that role, I went ahead and went into the gym and created what I called a one-arm cable sword slash. Attach a cable rope to the top of a cable, and I hold it in front of me, and I have that cable coming behind me, and all I do is just bring my fist down. So I'm doing essentially the bottom part of snapping that sword and trying to train my forearm in a way that you would never do in normal life unless you intended to do it. At no point do you have to basically take a hammer and then not use your forearm to hit it. Because imagine
Right.
taking that hammer
You're
for
just
you
using the
audio.
wrist.
Exactly. So for you audio listeners, take a hammer and swing the hammer. Now swing the hammer without moving your forearm. It's just that little bit of fist action. That's what I'm
Hmm.
talking about. Taking that action and putting resistance where your thumb is and then pulling it down. And it works a function that would otherwise never be trained. Find those for yourself. Fill your own gaps. I can't be there to do that for every single person listening and doing. So think about yourself and be creative. As long as you're safe, go nuts.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, do you do just for because I'm sure you'll probably get people reaching out to you after this episode airs, but are you able to do like online coaching and create programs for people like through online and stuff?
Yeah, online is really where I actually want to do most of my work. So I have someone I used to work with who's in New Zealand. I have someone I currently with who's in Australia. I've got a couple people in like Colorado and Texas. I have more people that are not in my time zone than are in my time zone that I work with.
Right
Yeah.
on.
Um, yeah, because I've even connected with some people in like the UK and everything too. Like it's actually super cool. I love to have that freedom where I can take people in a bunch of different countries and still be able to connect with them. And it's still the same gyms, it's still the same exercises. And as long as we can speak
Yeah.
the same language, like we're good.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. But yeah,
Um,
I'm perfectly happy to do all that because online is where I can be the most helpful.
when we create this post for our social media, I will tag you in and all that stuff, and then you can share it as well, and that way people can find your Instagram and stuff. But do
Mhm.
you want to just tell people your Instagram and how they can get a hold of you,
Mhm.
just so that way people listening can also hear it?
Yep, yep. I try to keep the same name on all my platforms. So Instagram, the handle is adaptable strength. The icon's basically just a 45-pound weight plate, but just says APSC on it. So that's me on Instagram. Website adaptablestrength.com. There's a contact form on there. YouTube is also adaptable strength because it's all the same. And but
Perfect.
also like I have zero problems with you just email me directly. It's alex at adaptablestrength.com. And I
Perfect.
honestly I find that to be super fun to just get the email and just skip all the middlemen. If you want to verify that I'm not a complete and utter tool, then sure, watch my stuff.
Yeah, 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 exactly. I'll also add your email then when we post this on social media. Another thing I was going to ask you is because obviously like there's tons of information for us to go over, and unfortunately I my wife has an appointment, so I do have to go grab my kid. But in a couple of weeks, would you be interested in coming on for again for part two? We can
Oh
have
yeah.
a bit more time set aside, and we can really go into depth with some of the workouts and that kind of stuff.
Oh yeah, definitely. That'd be great because I can go on this forever. This is the fun stuff for me.
Perfect. Yeah, dude, I love it, and our listeners, I know they really appreciate it as well. So, Alex, yeah, once again, buddy, thank you so much for coming on. For all of you guys listening, I will be posting on our social media our podcast poster from this episode. This episode will air in 2 weeks. So that will be Wednesday, 2 weeks from now. So that'll be February 18th is when this episode is airing. But I will have the poster on social media before then. So that way people can get in touch with you there, Alex. So, and then, yeah, everyone stay tuned for part two in a few weeks. And yeah, Alex, once again, buddy, thank you so much, man. Like total wealth of knowledge when it comes to helping first responders become stronger for their job. It's whether you're a police officer or a firefighter, it's a very unique job, and you're often put in very unique and awkward situations where you have to be able to have that strength and maintain um, certain control and that kind of stuff. So thank you as well for helping out the first responder community.
Of course, of course. I've been there. It sucks. I will help as much as I can.
Yeah, yeah, right on. Take care, guys.